Welcome to Renewed Faith, the Crown Spring Update. My name is Handre de Jongh, and I'm here with Chuck Bentley, CEO of Crown.
Nice to be with you, Handre.
Well, what a wonderful evening to share with each one of you. We're very excited that you have joined us. If you look at the bottom of your screen, you will see that there's a chat. Please click on that and tell us where you are joining from. Put in your state or the country you're joining from. We always love to see who's on and where you're from.
I can see some of those right now, Handre. Northern California, Portsmouth, Virginia, Houston. Great.
I see there's some from, am I correct, Frankfurt? Wow. Even from Frankfurt, there's somebody.
Yeah, Iowa, Seattle. Excellent.
Well, it's wonderful. Well, Chuck, I almost didn't make it tonight. I was traveling this week, visiting some of our partners. And yes, traveling is actually possible in these COVID times, but it was not the COVID travel that really was an Achilles heel for me. It was the weather.
I understand you and Frank took all day to get from here to Florida, which is not a very long drive. But it took you forever.
If we got in a car, we would have gotten there earlier than the weather delayed flights. Well, Chuck, since the last update, which was the winter update, something significant happened for me. My wife and myself became citizens in I think it was 2020. Yeah. And so our underage kids, there's a whole process for them to go through citizenship. And just 2 weeks ago, we had the privilege of taking them to Nashville, and they were sworn in as U.S. citizens.
Well, congratulations. It's exciting for us. I know that you had a dream in your heart years ago. You're a native to South Africa. Mm-hmm. You were living in Cape Town, and you felt like God might bring you here. And we're so blessed that he did, Handre. And so grateful for you and Mary Elise and all the children.
Well, thank you so much, Chuck. Well, tonight we are going to look at some of the highlights that happened here in Crown since the last winter update. And you will remember that Calvin Dillinger and Chuck spoke about 7 Gray Swans, the book that Chuck wrote. And Chuck, tell us what happened with this book.
Well, the book has done very well. We wrote about all the topics that I felt like we needed to be tracking and help you to be aware of, things like universal basic income, the runaway federal deficit, social scoring that continues to ratchet up inside China. All of these things are economic threats that could happen and that we tend to ignore. But the book is selling very well. People are using it in their small groups. They're using it to train their children or to share with employees. We're very pleased with it, and I hope people will continue to use it.
Well, if you haven't received your copy yet, please go to crown.org and you can order it from there, or simply just go to Amazon and get your copy from there. It's always good if you get it from Amazon because, and especially if you leave a comment there, it is good to read the comments from people that have bought the book and that have read it. Chuck, also the YouVersion Bible studies. So since the last update, we decided the YouVersion Bible app, which is, by the way, one of the most downloaded apps in the world, we have actually placed 4 or 5 of our studies, including 2 Spanish studies, on YouVersion.
Well, it's a big development for us because one of our goals is to get our content out as far and wide as possible, and to do it in a cost-effective way. So getting it on the YouVersion app, the last numbers I've seen is that 30,000 people have subscribed to our channel to receive that content, and more than 18,000 have already completed the courses that are online.
Well, that's a 60% completion rate. That's almost unheard of on apps. So we are really thankful to the Lord for this opportunity. Chuck, podcast we keep on producing podcasts and putting it out there with great content.
Well, we're super excited about that. We're allowing many voices to drive that content. We're interviewing you often, Handre, about your experience and how God is leading in your finances, and you're helping other people to get their budget right and to start saving money and doing those things that are so helpful to families. And our podcast is spreading. So it's another branch of media that we're super encouraged by.
And we even placed it on YouTube. And if you haven't yet subscribed to the Crown Financial Ministry YouTube channel, please do so. And you can see the podcast there on YouTube. Chuck, we also moved office.
Well, I'm excited about that. We're in our new offices right now. This is the first time we've broadcast a live update from this location. We made a change during COVID. We allowed our staff to decide if they would rather office from home, office remotely, and we've been doing that for a number of years anyway. So we were able to reduce our office footprint by 50%, which means we're saving more money, and I'm excited about that.
Well, that's one of the things you always promote for all of us here at Crown, is to be thrifty and to be good stewards. And this move has really been, I call, a stewardship move.
Well, we like the space, and I hope our supporters are enjoying the setup here. We think it's great. So you'll be seeing us more often from right here.
Well, Chuck, in this very space, this new space, you and Frank Gonzalez recently did a Spanish conference.
What's happened during COVID is we've done more online events. In 2019, we did 20-something live events, and we had to cancel them the next year. So we've been doing those online. But what's happening is we're reaching more people overall. I think now more than 5,000 of our Latin leaders have watched that conference after it was produced live. So it just keeps producing impact.
And talking about Latin America and how the news is spreading throughout our Latin leaders and even Spanish-speaking leaders right here in the U.S., isn't it exciting that there's 8 new Crown Stewardship Centers almost ready to be opened in Latin America?
Well, I want to explain what a stewardship center means when we use that language. It means we will have a physical location where people can come for training and then spread out and impact the rest of the nation. And we have 8 countries now coming to the United States for training. They will go back to places like Guatemala and Peru and Chile and Paraguay, and wonderful leaders who want to be trained. We're licensing our material to them. And that's a really big part of our outreach, and one that encourages me so much.
And these stories of stewardship, they just keep on spreading and spreading. And recently you received 2 books of stories that's impacted people.
Well, I want to tell our audience about these books because it's the ripple effect. When we have the opportunity to train someone, it impacts their lives, and they go on and impact other lives. And it's not uncommon for them to send me a book if they write a book about their experience. This one I just received this week, called Foster Parenting Matters. The author included a note. She said, "Dear Crown team, we became debt-free in 1997 through the books of your ministry. We actually began the process a few years earlier, but it not only changed our relationships, it changed our direction in life. We're now Crown coaches, and we're serving as foster parents." She said, in this book, Crown is referenced on page 35, 36, 37, and 82. And so I'd always enjoy getting those books, and thank you for sending that to me. Here's another one called Intentional Spending. And the author wrote on page 6, she said, "A few years after we got married and a baby arrived, our church offered a class through Crown Financial Ministries. We signed up, and I honestly think that was one of the best decisions we ever made." So this one just came in as well and represents a wonderful ripple effect of the work that we're doing here.
Well, we're going to go straight into tonight's program. And Chuck, you want to introduce our first guest?
Well, we're going to talk about a lot of topics tonight. The main one that you were interested in hearing about is the economy. It's top of mind for everyone. We're all concerned. There's dissonance over what's going to happen. So I called one of our friends, an expert named Vince Birley. He manages billions of dollars. He's been doing this his entire career. We sat down for a quick interview. I think you're going to appreciate it. Let me just mention, if you have questions, you can put them in the chat box, and we will be answering your questions throughout the evening. So let's go to the interview with Vince. Well, Vince, thanks for joining us. It's always a privilege to have you with us.
Yeah, great to be here.
I thought I'd give you the opportunity to introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about your background and your years of experience in the financial industry.
Sure. Well, currently I'm the CEO of Biden Financial, and we manufacture 4 ETFs, exchange traded funds, that are based on biblical principles. And before that, I was with Ronald Blue as the Chief Strategy Officer, as well as the Chairman of the Investment Policy Committee. Ronald Blue and Company has now been called Ronald Blue Trust because it was sold several years ago, and that's when I made my transition to Vidant. But Ronald Blue Trust, a lot of people probably know, is one of the largest wealth managers for the Christian evangelical market in the United States.
So Vince, in your lifetime, would you estimate how much money you've been in charge of overseeing or stewarding?
Yeah, so I think the height was about 10 billion in assets. And so it's about 10,000 households at Ronald Blue Trust. Today, we have about $1.5 billion in the 4 funds, and then we also help about another 8 billion in assets in other funds. So probably around the 10 billion range.
Yeah, I just wanted to establish that it's far more than I'm managing in my retirement accounts, and that this is something you do professionally. It's something you've got many years of experience at. And so I'm going to ask you a few questions to help those of us who are thinking about our investments. Everybody is concerned about inflation. I'm reading that it's going to get really bad. Some people I respect think we're going to see the beginning of hyperinflation soon. Others are telling us, particularly the Fed, that it's nothing to worry about. Where do you stand on the issue of inflation?
Yeah, so I'll kind of give the answer. I think higher inflation is at a higher risk than hyperinflation, but let me kind of walk through maybe for our listeners how inflation works, because I think there's some misunderstanding that when they read the press as far as money being printed, I'm assuming that's the risk that you're hearing about, is all this money being printed. And what's going to happen is it's got to be inflation. Well, there's been money being printed, as you know, really since the 08-09 great financial crisis. And what happened is that the supply was created by the Fed, but it never really got its way into circulation. And the circulation is what causes inflation. So the Fed usually gets their money lent out through the banks. Well, the banks actually strengthened their balance sheet and didn't lend it out, and they created what they call excess reserves. So that was one thing that kept inflation from happening. The second thing that kept inflation from happening is that the dollar strengthened over the last 10 years. And so foreign investors were actually buying a lot of dollars. So almost half of the currency of the dollars are actually owned internationally. It's not in the U.S. economy. So the definition of inflation, as you know, is that there's too many. If the growth of the money supply is faster than the growth of the goods and services, you have price inflation. So we had actually hardly any increase in the money in circulation compared to the amount of growth that we had over the last 10 years, and why we had actually lower inflation. So now you fast forward and say, okay, well, what about now? Because we just created a whole bunch more. There's more risk now, because the way they did it is they went around the banks. So the government, in essence, got the money directly into consumers' checking accounts through the stimulus payments, through the PPP loans, into businesses, and they just borrowed the money from the Federal Reserve in effect. So that means there is more money in circulation now. So there is risk for higher inflation now. The risk for hyperinflation would require, though, the somewhere $7 trillion in assets held foreignly in dollars would have to come back into the US. And that would be the case for hyperinflation.
And that doesn't look very probable to me, and I don't think to you as well.
I don't think so. If it did, it probably wouldn't be fast. So the risks there are what's going on. The dollar is actually weakened recently against other international currencies. So people are looking at the amount of debt that we're taking on, and the international community saying, man, the dollar is getting weaker. If that were to continue, or there be an alternative reserve currency other than the dollar. So let's say, like the Bitcoin issue is a potential risk to the dollar. People buying, central banks are now potentially even buying some of the digital currencies. China obviously is very interested in removing the dollar as a reserve, because it's a huge benefit to be the reserve currency of the world, because everyone wants dollars.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Vince, I guess maybe along with that, what I'm hearing is we're long overdue for a market correction. The doomsayers have been calling for it, I think, for 10 years, and it keeps being delayed. And so they ratchet it up. Okay, it's coming, it's coming, it's coming. I get asked that. When do I think the big correction is coming? I'm not able to tell the future. I think Yogi Berra said it correct that predictions are really difficult, especially about the future. And so what do you think in terms of a market correction?
Let's talk about, it's a supply and demand issue with the stock market or any other markets. If there's more buyers and sellers, the markets are going to go up, and vice versa. So that's how you'd have to get a market correction, is you have to have a lot more sellers than buyers. So even though we often sometimes will take our own view of what we think the market should be worth, other people may think just the opposite of you. And if there's more people thinking the opposite of you, then you're kind of confused as to why is the market going up? Well, there's more buyers and sellers. So just the math of this requires there to be a lot of sellers, which means there's going to have to be some sort of a panic thing that happens that causes people to panic. And you get this deluge of sellers compared to buyers. So that's just how it would work. And that's why it's so hard to predict, because it's really behavioral that you're trying to predict, is when are people going to actually sell out? It's not that the price is high. Now, the higher it goes, the more likely there could be some fall. But that doesn't mean there will be a fall in the market. But let me give you some other way to think about this. And I think if you look at the price of the stock market on an absolute basis, it's very, very expensive. But on a relative basis, it's not that expensive compared to other asset classes. So if you think about bonds, you're not going to get, or bank deposits, you're hardly getting any interest at all.
Right.
So when you compare stocks to bonds, stocks actually are priced about the way that they should be relative to bond yields. Now, bond yields have gone up recently, about 1.7% on a 10-year bond. That was down to 1% at the end of the year. But now, how do you look at a stock? A stock is you take the profits divided by the price. That's how you get a yield. Because that's what you get when you own a stock. You get profits. And right now, the stock market, based on last year's earnings, is about a 3.6% yield. That relative to a 1 to 1.5% yield on bonds is about the right spread. So the question is are bond yields too low? And I would say they are lower than what they should be. And that's back to the question we came back earlier with, is the Fed is actually buying all these bonds, lowering the price artificially below what they probably are worth. So the way you probably get the most stock market crash is if the bond yields really were to go up. Stocks would have to go down in price to get the yield up. So then you have a stock market correction. That would be the biggest reason you'd have a stock market correction, if bonds really went up in yield.
And my view is people don't have a very good alternative right now. I mean, I'm not wanting to tuck money away in a certificate of deposit making nothing. It's not even keeping up with inflation right now. So I think a lot of people may be like me with their retirement funds, that the stock market or bonds are the better place to have it.
Yeah, I mean, that's right. There's where else are you going to put your money? And so that's where back to the more buyers and sellers, because there's people, even the retail trades that we've heard about recently in the first quarter, people buying things with their stimulus checks. I mean, there's more money going into the markets than there is money leaving the markets right now, which means it's hard for the markets to correct.
We have people that you and I both know that are very concerned that with the change of administration, the market is going to go down. That has proven not to be the case. What are you telling your clients right now, Vince, in terms of their investment portfolios? People who are coming to you and saying, what should I do? Is it going to correct badly? Should I park money on the sideline? How are you advising them?
Yeah. Well, I think the biggest thing, and you've heard us talk about this a lot, this is one of the things I put in place at Ronald Blue Trust, is really to match the duration or the maturity length of your asset to the length of the time where you're going to need your money. And so if you're going to need your money next year, you don't put yourself in something like a stock market, because that's got a 30 to 40 year maturity duration to think about. You put your money in 1 year certificates. If you need your money in 1 year, 1 year. If you need your money in 5 year, buy 5 year bonds. If your money's in 10 year, so match when you're going to need your money. So if you're going to need so much money over the next 10 years, and make sure you don't have money in that money in the stock market. So the first thing is to match the maturity length of your need with the maturity length of your asset. And that's the easiest way to kind of have some peace of mind, is, it's going to mature when you're actually going to need the money, and you don't have to risk that. Once you get those reserves set aside, then you can start thinking about longer term, and you don't have to think about the short term as far as if the stock market is going to correct or not, because you got 10, 15, 20 years to think about that. And that's probably the biggest thing that we've done to help relieve people from thinking about what's going to happen next year versus what's the long term. And I think that's evidence of a world that's very uncertain and unstable, and it's always going to be that way. So that's the first thing I would say.
Well, Vince, people are going to be interested in learning more about you. How can they find you on the web?
BidenFinancial.com is where you can find myself and the funds that we actually represent. And I think I can be contacted at Birley. V as in Vince, Birley, Birley, at BidenFinancial.com if you have any questions. Usually when I do these, Con, I do get some questions, so I'm very comfortable getting those and answering those. I'm not an advisor anymore. We manage funds. So if you need an advisor, I can make a referral if you're looking for an advisor. But I'm glad to help anybody at Crown, and really appreciate what Crown has done over the years under your leadership, Chuck.
Well, thank you, Vince. People always tell me that I have a calming a presence, a calm voice, a nice, calm demeanor. But I'm telling you, yours is about twice as calming as mine. I always enjoy talking to you. I leave here not worried about inflation, not worried about a correction or my investments. So it's been a great time invested, Vince.
Oh, that's great to hear, Chuck. Always good to talk to you.
Thank you, man. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Well, God has blessed us with many friends like Vince Birley, and I thank the Lord for him being willing to come and share his wisdom with us. And we hope to keep you informed as these economic conditions change. It's a dynamic time for all of us. Another topic I wanted to bring into the equation tonight is the topic of trust. I was speaking to Warren Cole Smith offline about the recent fall of many well-respected Christian leaders. Mm-hmm. And Warren had a system of tracking signs that lead to a fall. And because so many of you support many organizations, I thought it would be good to talk to Warren about that very sensitive topic. So coming up next is my interview with Warren Cole Smith of Ministry Watch. My guest is Warren Cole Smith. Warren, glad to have you today.
It's great to be with you, Chuck. It's an honor.
Well, at Ministry Watch, you guys do two things, which I appreciate. One is hold ministry leaders accountable for their behavior with finances or their personal integrity, all those things that you're watching out for, and you write reports on those issues. But you also point out those who are setting a good example. And I have to tell you, Warren, I'm really honored to always be on that side of the ledger with Ministry Watch to be recognized for our desire to be transparent. Your organization awarded us with the Shining Light Award last year, and I'd like for you to explain what that means and what's involved in the criteria to receive that.
You bet. Well, I tell people, Chuck, that it's not magic, it's math, that there's honestly very little judgment on my part or any of our leadership's part involved in it. We set some criteria in two areas. One is financial efficiency. And a real simple definition of that is how much money actually goes to ministry. If you get $1 in, how much goes to ministry? How much goes to administrative and management costs? How much goes to fundraising? We like to see most of it going to ministry and as little as possible going to management and fundraising. We rate ministries on a 1 to 5 star rating, 5-star being the highest. And you guys had a 5-star rating last year. So that was fantastic. That puts you automatically in about the top 12% of the 850 ministries that we have in our business. In addition to that, to be a shining light, you also have to have an A transparency grade. So a 5-star financial efficiency rating and an A transparency grade. Transparency to us means how forthcoming are you with your information? Do you get an annual audit? Are you members of the ECFA, the Evangelical Council for Financial Accountability, which means that you have to adhere to their standards? Do you release your Form 990s to the public? Those are the criteria that we use to give a ministry transparency grade. You guys got an A transparency grade, a 5-star financial efficiency rating. Believe it or not, of the 850 ministries in our database, I don't remember off the top of my head, Chuck. I probably should have looked this up, but I think only about 15 ministries out of 850 met both criteria. You guys met that criteria, so congratulations. It's an honor to recognize you guys as a shining light because, like you say, we pick on the bad guys some at Ministry Watch, so we like to honor the good guys as well, and you guys are definitely among the good guys.
Well, I appreciate that balance because the Lord tells us in His Word that we should hold each other accountable, that we should try to reach for the highest standards of not only our integrity and our efficiency, but also for personal behavior and on moral issues. And Warren, you and I have seen far too much of that over the past 18 months. It's just been a litany of really major failures and falls in the body of Christ. And I think it's created a crisis of trust where ministries like ours are probably people are being more skeptical than they have been in the past, which I think that's fine. But a lot of times donors don't know what to look for. And I was fascinated by your work that you're assembling on the red flags that people should notice in advance before there's a fall. And I'd like for you to sort of lay out the work that you're doing and just some of the top red flags that donors should be looking for.
Right. Well, yeah, we're working on a kind of a more comprehensive document that will probably have 50 to 75 red flags that donors should be looking for, motivated in part by the Ravi Zacharias scandal. We had one of our donors who was a significant donor to RZIM, and I knew Ravi personally, Chuck, as I'm sure I think you did too, as a matter of fact. And, that was a real gut punch to a lot of us. And I think it's caused, a whole lot of us that are involved in leadership and evangelical ministries to ask the question, what should we have done? What should we have seen? What did we miss? And, and how now shall we live? How should we go forward from here? So we're working on that document, and we'll make that document available to you and everyone else free of charge whenever we get it finished, Chuck. But I would just say in the short term, I would counsel all of our viewers to really focus on 4 or 5 things. Number one would be a couple of things that we've already mentioned briefly. Are they members of the Evangelical Council for Financial Accountability? The ECFA is not perfect. We have been critical here at Ministry Watch of the ECFA on a number of points, but neither are we perfect. And they're great at what they do. They set standards. We are fans of the ECFA. We're advocates for organizations to join the ECFA. Number 2, do they release their Form 990s to the public? That should have been a red flag for Ravi Zacharias International Ministries. About 5 years ago, RZIM claimed to be a church. And from that moment forward, we didn't see their financial statements. In fact, I think it might have been in 2014. I'd have to fact check myself on that number. But that's a red flag. That should be a really important signal to donors and to others in the ministry space that something, if they're trying to hide something, what are they trying to hide and why? And so we think releasing a Form 990 to the public is really important. I know that there are reasons, there are some religious liberty issues that people are concerned about related to that. And Chuck, we can talk about that if you want. But our position is release your Form 990s. One of the things that you can see on the Form 990 is the board composition. And that's another thing that we encourage donors to look for. We think the board, there's no magic number, there's no right number or wrong number for number of board members, but we think in general, 7 to 12 board members for most ministries is about the right number. If it's smaller than that, it gets to be a little too insular and inward looking. If it's much larger than that, it becomes difficult for dissenting voices to be heard in a large board. Ravi Zacharias' board, I'm just using him as an example because that's one that we know, we can talk about others, was a very, very large board, and we didn't know who was on the board. When they stopped releasing their Form 990s, we no longer had access to the names of the people on the board because that's where you can find the names of board members is on the Form 990. So we think those, I mean, there's a lot of other things we could talk about, but release your Form 990s, be a member of the ECFA, have appropriate board governance. And in addition to size, I should also say that most of those board members should be independent. They shouldn't be related to the president, or they shouldn't be employees of the organization. Maybe 1 or 2 would be appropriate and okay, but certainly nowhere near a majority should be insiders. They should mostly be independent board members.
Well, I agree with that, Warren, not only because we have those practices here and we have for many years, but also for others to be informed of what are the factors that set up a ministry leader to be vulnerable to a fall. And when you're practicing transparency, when you have an authentic board that's holding you accountable, that they're involved in your life, it's not friends, family, and coworkers that are just rubber stamping your direction. I think it makes you stronger. I think it helps other people to have trust and confidence in their leadership. And I'm concerned about the trend that we're seeing, Warren, and I so appreciate the work that you're doing. It's painful to read sometime, honestly. When you asked me to comment about Ravi at the time that happened, it was so tender. I couldn't say anything because I was aching over that particular one. One of the most influential apologists of our time and bringing disgrace to the name of Christ was just horrifying for all of us.
Well, and Chuck, if I could interrupt you just for a second, I remember that conversation well, and it was such a tender moment for you that you had trouble even speaking privately with me about that, and certainly didn't want to talk about it on the podcast. But let me just say that I just want to affirm that in you and with our listeners as well. It causes me no glee to write on the fall of Christian ministers and Christian organizations. I think the grieving that you felt, that it was so real in your life, it was convicting to me, and I think convicting in a positive way. It showed me that maybe I take too much. Sometimes it's possible to, the thrill of the kind of journalism that we do causes me to forget sometimes that these are tragedies when they occur, and that our goal should never be to gloat or to say, how much better I am than that person or some other person, but rather to be reminded of my own humanity, to be humble about this process, and to seek restoration whenever that's at all possible. And I just want to affirm your posture in that, Chuck, that you really showed a tender heart in that towards me, and it's been something that I have remembered since.
Well, I know that ministry leaders that have an impact in my life are dear and precious to me, and I feel for them and their families and all those that are impacted by that. It is a disaster when it happens, and we have to be vigilant. And I want to be vigilant, and I want to be humble, and I want to be teachable. And so when I find a resource like yours, I've already asked our board of directors to get the list and to use it internally so that we're not just checking the boxes, but we've equipped our board to look for the things that show that the ministry is going off the rails. If I could be effective in that area of helping rebuild trust between the partners that are willing to support us and help them to find organizations that are trustworthy, I think we've both done a good thing, Warren. One of our key partners gives, they told us they give 10 times more. They were giving 10 times more to Ravi's organization than here. But that trust has been destroyed, and they're wondering, how do we trust organizations like this? And I'm going to recommend your work and the work that Ministry Watch is doing. So thank you for what you do, Warren, and please keep up the good work, even though I know it's hard at times. It's necessary, and the Lord told us to call out those who are not walking the walk within His community.
Well, I appreciate that encouraging word, and I would just say, right back at you. I'm so grateful for you, Chuck, and your ministry and long years of faithful service. The older I get, the more I appreciate people that have been walking with the Lord faithfully Amen. For a long time, and just being not worried so much about success, but faithfulness. And I think that is really ultimately our goal, and the fruit is up to God.
Well, Ann and I pray every day that we would finish well, because you can get blindsided at any time in your life, at any time in the Christian walk, no matter how many years you've been faithful. Satan is always looking to undermine, and so we're trying to be vigilant. How can people find out more about Ministry Watch and you, Warren?
Well, I appreciate you asking. Pretty simple. Ministrywatch.com is our website, and we post new content every day, except weekends. We don't post new content on weekends typically. And you can also sign up for a daily email that we send. We send a daily email every day, except Sundays. We don't send anything on Sundays. And we also have an About Ministry Watch tab that will show you our statement of faith, our latest financial statements, other important information about us that we think our donors and readers need to know. That same transparency. So ministrywatch.com, and I think you'll find everything you need to know about us there.
Thanks for joining us, Warren. Appreciate your work.
It's great to be with you. Thank you, Chuck. It's an honor.
Well, that was great wisdom downloaded to us from both Chuck, you, and Warren. Thank you so much for that interview. Next, we're going to listen to an interview that Calvin Dillinger did with one of our budget coaches, Priscilla Douglas. Our budget coaching keeps on doing great things for people in all the updates that we've heard. It's so important to be transparent with your finances, and budget coaches help us in that process. So let's listen to the interview that Calvin had with Priscilla.
I'm pleased to be joined by Priscilla Douglas. Priscilla is one of our budget coaches that's served with us for over 6 years now. Priscilla has worked with, I believe, a little bit under 100 clients, and is in Garner, North Carolina, so right outside of Raleigh, North Carolina. Priscilla, thank you so much for spending time with us today.
You are welcome. Thank you for having me.
So, Priscilla, tell us a little bit about the budget coaching program.
Thank you, Kevin. Absolutely. So the online budget coaching program is designed to match an individual with one of the certified coaches that will carefully evaluate a person's current financial status. Then the coach will help them work alongside with them to develop a customized spending plan and debt elimination approach to put them on the road to financial freedom.
I love that. Who would you say the program is really designed for?
It's certainly designed, Kevin, for a person that is in a position of chasing after their bills and not knowing how to get in front of them. It's designed for a person that has lost control of how to manage their finances. Definitely, if a person is tired of losing sleep over financial concerns, if they're feeling alone and overwhelmed with financial difficulties, that person is a perfect candidate for a budget coach.
That's wonderful. Well, Priscilla, you've worked with a lot of clients, close to 100 clients now over the last 6 years. What are some of the trends that you see coming out of the program of impact for individuals that you've worked with? And then, kind of a follow-up question to that, do you have any stories that have really impacted you of clients that you've worked with?
So actually, Calvin, this program has impact clients, what I like to call, to a place of an awakening. They begin to understand that God has a part and they have a part that brings balance to knowing and learning how to be a good steward of their finances. They emerge full of hope because now they're in control of their finances. They're no longer chasing bills, but are in front of them. And Calvin, they discover that their finances are simply a tool and not the dictator of their lives. My favorite testimony, actually there are several, is when a client realizes that their situation is not hopeless, that there is indeed hope. As they walk through the Bible session studies and complete the assignments, Calvin, they begin to realize and see that where they are today is not where they'll be tomorrow. And then you begin to see how they become inspired in becoming better and doing better. It is an incredible transformation to be a witness to all of these things.
Yeah, that's key. Well, we would welcome any folks that are interested in becoming a client or a coach of the program. To learn more, you can go to crown.org/budget coaching. We welcome folks to join our community. If you need help, we're here to help you. That's a fantastic resource that Crown offers to folks all over. And we'd be happy to help you or to partner with you as a budget coach as well. So thank you, Priscilla. Appreciate your time today and blessings on you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Priscilla, for your testimony. I am so encouraged. And I saw in the chat box that Barbara said that you trained her to be a great budget coach as well. That's the ripple effect. And I'm so grateful for that. And if you want to become a budget coach, if any of you are listening now, we have online training to make that happen. And I pray you'll step forward. I want to talk a little bit about the theme of this conference or this update called Renewed Faith. I want to use a couple of examples that I hope will illustrate my point. If you were going to fly from, let's say, New York to London and you had your choice of aircraft, would you choose option A, this homemade aircraft, or would you choose option B to get you from New York to London? Well, I hope that made it obvious with the pictures I used. I think most of you would choose B. I know I would choose B. And some of the more adventurous types might say, if A is cheaper, I might try A. Well, just for illustration purposes, I wanted to use this example because when you make a choice like that, when you choose an aircraft, you have an objective in the back of your mind. You want to arrive safely. And so you choose the aircraft or the pilot that you're going to put your faith in. This is a poignant illustration for me because a number of years ago, I was flying from Johannesburg, South Africa to Durban, South Africa. And it's a very short flight, really short, under an hour, maybe just 30 or 40 minutes. I was on the flight with my wife, Ann, and our two youngest boys at the time, Luke and John. Luke was sitting with his mom and John was sitting next to me, and we experienced turbulence. And I have to tell you, it's the worst turbulence that I've ever been in all of my years of flying around the world. It was so bad that someone passed out on the flight, and the pilot asked if there was a medic or a doctor on board to give assistance. And my son, John, at the time asked me, "Dad, do you think we're going to crash? And I said, let's not talk about that right now. Not a good time for that question. As we came in for the landing, the plane was going side to side. And I knew it was, if we tried to land, it might not work. And so right as we got near the tarmac, the pilot pulled out of the landing and just went straight up and went out over the Indian Ocean and started circling in these really heavy winds. We did that for a little while, and then he goes back to land, and we started doing it again the second time, except worse. And our plane was just being tossed like this back and forth. And again, before he could touch down, we pulled out of it and went out over the ocean. And then the pilot came on. Now, in my mind, what I'm thinking immediately is, I wonder if this guy's a good pilot. Have I made a good decision to be on South African Airways with a qualified pilot? Does he know what he's doing? You know, I'm ready to get out of the plane immediately. I've lost all confidence in it. And so the pilot comes on and he says, ladies and gentlemen, we're experiencing wind shear. Well, he didn't have to tell me that. I had figured that out. Something was really bad. He said, but this aircraft is designed to withstand this velocity of wind. And we've been through this before, so I'm going to try a third time to land the plane. And if it doesn't work, well, we'll just fly back to Johannesburg. Well, at that point, if I had a little voter on that plane, I would have voted, go back to Johannesburg now. Do not try that again. It was nerve-wracking. But obviously, we landed the plane. Now, here's the reason I share that story with you. When you talk about increasing your faith, you don't increase your faith in faith. You can't just conjure up more faith. Faith must have an object. Now, I had to place faith in that pilot and that airplane to get from Johannesburg to Durban. That's my earthly destination. And I wasn't sure if I'd made a bad choice or not. But I had a larger faith than that. And my faith was placed in Jesus Christ to get me from where I am on earth to my eternal destination. And to renew my faith, I have to get to know the object of my faith better. I can't just grow my faith by trying to increase it. I have to decide that what I've placed my faith in is worthy of my confidence. In Hebrews 11:1, it says, now, faith is confidence in what we hope for and assurance about what we do not see. In the case of placing our faith in Christ, it's not a visual determination. He took that away from us. He said, we place our faith in him, even though we cannot see him. In fact, he said, blessed are those who do believe, who have not seen. So faith is a matter of confidence. I think about the example that in Hebrews, the Hall of Faith, chapter 11, and it goes through all of the people who had faith in God. And it's the Hall of Fame of believers because God was very proud of them, that no matter what they experienced, no matter what their circumstances were, they didn't lose confidence in him. They went through good times and bad times, but they did not waver. And I think about Moses. In chapter 11, verse 24, it says, by faith, Moses, when he had grown up, refused to be known as the son of Pharaoh's daughter. Now, I added a few thoughts in that slide. It said he had grown up. He had matured. He had left the childish phase of his life where he was now thinking like an adult. Remember, the scripture says at some point in our life, we think like a child and reason like a child. But then when we mature, we start to think like adults. And this says in Moses' life, when he became mature, he placed confidence in what he hoped for, and he had assurance in what he could not see. And he made a decision to place his identity in the Lord, not in Pharaoh. Now, at that time, it was a monumental decision. Pharaoh was the most powerful person on the face of the earth, the richest person in the world at that time. You've seen the the tours that go around in museums of all the gold that they found in the pyramids and all of the riches of Egypt at that time. So he turned his back on the world's wealth. It says in the next verse, he chose voluntarily. In other words, he said, I am electing out of my own free will to be mistreated along with the people of God, rather to enjoy the fleeting pleasures of sin. And so he made a decision based on logic that sin is pleasurable. It brings pleasure, but it's fleeting. It's not going to last. And so we see that Moses was thinking this through to make his final decision, which you see in the next slide. He regarded disgrace for the sake of Christ as of greater value than the treasures of Egypt. He knew what the treasures were. He had access to them. In many ways, they could have been his. He had favor with Pharaoh. But he made a decision that the disgrace of being identified with the Jewish people who were treated as slaves was of more value than all the treasure he would inherit from Pharaoh. And it gave the reason that he made that decision. It said, because he was looking ahead to his reward. Now, in my view, this is a reasoned financial choice after evaluating what had real value. What had real value to him was not the riches of the world, but what was to come in the promises of God. And I wanted you to look at that in your life, because it is my position that you and I have to determine what has the most value to us and what are we going to really put our faith in. I didn't mention this earlier, but just last week, Ann and I were invited to be guests on Focus on the Family on their broadcast. We went out to Colorado Springs together, and very reluctantly, I might add. And Jim Daly and John Fuller interviewed us about our book, Money Problems, Marriage Solutions. It got delayed during COVID, and so we finally got to go out there. And it was a great experience. And I have to tell you, Ann did a wonderful job. That broadcast will be aired August the 13th, if you want to put that on your calendar, and be praying for us that God will use it. They didn't tell us in advance what the questions would be. They just talked to us for 36 minutes, and they cut that down to 27-minute broadcast. And we were just transparent about the problems that we had before the Crown class, which transformed our life. And I remember Jim looked right at Ann and said, tell us what changed your stubborn husband's heart. And she said, I got him to go to this Crown class. Now, that was in 1999. And my wife said to him on the air, it changed everything. And then Jim turned and he looked at me and he said, well, Chuck, what really changed? I mean, was it your budget? What changed that made such a profound impact in your life? And I got choked up when I looked at him, because I was reflecting back on this monumental change. In some ways, it was just like the decision that we just read about. I decided that I would no longer serve money. I repented of my sin of loving money. I said that on the air. I was an idolater. I had lost my first love. Yes, I knew the Lord. I had faith in the Lord, but over time, I'd put my faith in money. And in reality, I had to admit that money was controlling my life. It controlled my time. It controlled my energy, my creativity, all my goals, all my ambition, all my identity was wrapped up in money. And I was ashamed of what I had done. And I repented of that. I also repented of how I treated Ann through that, because she saw it but couldn't convince me of it. And that repentance has been one of the greatest decisions of my life. Apart from knowing the Lord, repenting of being controlled by money did change everything. It's the same decision that Moses made, that I would rather turn my back on the riches of this world than have and be esteemed as a true sold out follower of Christ, being pleasing to him, not by men, but pleasing to the Lord. of a person of true faith, that money wasn't going to control me. It's one of the reasons we say here at Crown, if we get the whole world on a budget, the whole world out of debt, and the whole world with savings, money in the bank, we will have failed in our mission. You know why? Because our mission isn't about more money. It's not simply about having the things of this world. We want to help people have a heart change, that they see that this world and its pleasures are temporal, that we teach them the truth of what God says in his word, that there's something better than money, and it's him. Money is not going to satisfy, no matter how much you have or how little you have. And here's what I love about that. It puts us on a level playing field, that anybody can have faith in Jesus Christ, regardless of your financial status. There are people watching now who have very, very little. There'll be people watching this after it's broadcast who have, in the world's eyes, almost nothing, but they can be rich in faith. In fact, it says in James that we should esteem those who are rich in faith because they know how to trust God every single day for their needs. We're to learn from them because they have confidence in Jehovah Jireh, their provider. I wanted to say tonight that when I share that story about repenting of my love of money, my hope is that the Holy Spirit is convicting some of you of the same thing. That maybe you haven't realized that money really has been in control. You see the danger of helping people with their finances in a good way, which we love to do. We love to get the testimonies that they're debt-free, that they're on a budget again, or they're doing the mechanics of money correctly, God's way. The danger is that money can still take control of their life, and they don't fully surrender everything to him. And here's why I think that's so important. Because we're probably going to go through a time in our country where we see the destruction of wealth, where we see the destruction of the things that people have put their confidence in, where we see pain and suffering, where things begin to happen that we can't change. It's like sitting on that plane when we're going through turbulence. I absolutely felt helpless. There was nothing I could do. I couldn't give the pilot advice. I don't know how to fly the plane. I just had to trust that we were going to get on the ground. And it's very similar when we come to the Lord like a child and we say, Lord, I can't save myself. I have made mistakes. I have sinned. I have broken your law or your principles, or I've been selfish or self-consumed, and I need you. And I just want to ask you with me right now, if God's convicting you, will you pray with me? Maybe tonight you want to give your heart to the Lord for the first time and to become a part of his family. Maybe you just want to turn from the sin that has controlled you, the money that's dominated your life, and be free of that. Be free to truly love the Lord and to serve him and him only. The Lord said in Matthew 6, you cannot serve God and money. You're going to hate one and love the other. You have to make a choice. Who is the true master of your life? So will you pray with me? Lord Jesus, I need you. Lord, I need you to keep my heart turned towards you, to fully surrender everything to you. Just as Moses said, I don't want the fleeting pleasures of this world. I'd rather be identified with you. Lord, I pray that right now there are people who are surrendering fully everything that's been in their hands. Maybe they're controlled by fear of loss. Maybe they're controlled by their wealth. Maybe they're controlled by identity that they have as an executive or as someone with lots of resources. And they've subtly allowed it to take control where it is the most important thing in their life. And they're consumed with doubt and stress and unrest and the loss of contentment. Lord, I pray that they will surrender to you right now. And I pray if someone has never met you, Lord, that they would be able to say that they're willing to turn from their sin right now and confess their sin and profess that you are Lord, and to transform their heart, to transform them now, Lord, from the corruptible to the incorruptible, to set them on a path to be with you for eternity, to overcome the sting of death. Lord, I pray that our ministry will glorify you, not money, that the help that we provide will be the help that transforms people's hearts to love you and to love people, and to keep money from getting inside their heart and mind and controlling their decisions. I pray for reconciliation in families if there's been strife and fighting over finances. I pray for victory for those who are struggling right now to make ends meet. I pray they'll turn to you. I thank you for this moment, Lord, and I pray many will profess your name as Lord and Savior. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Amen. Well, thank you so much, Chuck. That was profound. That was deep, and it cut to the between bone and marrow, because we all at some stage have asked that question. Is he truly Lord? You see, there can be, what I learned out of this, Chuck, is that biblical stewardship can never happen if there's not truly lordship.
Yeah.
He has to be Lord, and we have to give everything to him. Thank you for that reminder, and thank you for the reminder of renewing our faith. Because without that, what is there? So thank you so much. Wow. It almost feels surreal to end this, but we want to be good stewards of time as well. And so I just want to remind you that the summer update will be July 15th. July 15th for the summer update. This one will be a little bit different. We're going to have a shorter section of teaching and encouragement and maybe telling what's happening in Crown. And we're going to focus more on prayer time. So I want you to be ready for the summer update, July 15th, to come ready to pray. We're going to have break up into groups on Zoom, and we're going to seek the face of the Lord together for our families, for the countries that we represent. And we're really going to trust him together. I also want to make sure that previously or earlier on this recording, we spoke about YouTube channel, and there's lots of resources that we really put on YouTube and that you can benefit and can share with others. So please subscribe to our YouTube channel, Crown Financial Ministries. And last but not least, there will be a link on crown.org/renewedfaithgift. It is the Do Well study. We are giving all of you who register on that link, and that link will appear on the screen right after we end this broadcast. If you click on that link, you will receive the Do Well study free of charge. And we want to encourage you, as Chuck shared tonight, the books that people were writing and telling stories of how they were impacted by Crown. You can do the study, or you can pass it forward to somebody else. Let's be faithful. Let's make sure that lordship is our starting point. And then from there, we go to biblical stewardship. We want to thank you that you've joined us at this update this evening. Chuck, I want to thank you for the wonderful word and for all the wonderful interviews that we received tonight. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Handre. And thank you for joining us. We look forward to having you back. God bless each one of you. It's our joy to serve you.